So to begin, our first question, what, or perhaps who is Al-Lateef, Al-Wakeel, Al-Hakeem? Inshallah, I'd like each one of you, if you allow it, to choose one of these names and to give us a short summary. The names are Al-Lateef, Al-Wakeel, and Al-Hakeem.
Bismillah. I was going to do that Muslim thing where we keep telling each other to go first, but ain't nobody got time for that, man. Bismillah. The feedback is a bit strong. I'm going to start with Al-Lateef. I think one of the best translations is subtle, gentle, subtle. And the way I think of this is the subtle aspects of things that work out in our lives. You see something happen that couldn't have been planned, and it just happens the way it's supposed to happen, and you just say Al-Lateef. But also Lateef has an element of gentleness too. So for me, I like to look at those aspects, that it's subtle and it's gentle at the same time. Almost, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. Like, we don't compare anything of the created world to Allah, but almost like a subtle breeze, right? It brings you goodness. It's subtle, but without it, things would be so difficult. So, Lateef, that's my understanding of the word Lateef.
I'll take the name Al-Hakeem. Al-Hakeem, you could say the all-wise. We know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Alim, the all-knowing. And it's one thing to know, but it's another thing to know what to do with that knowledge. Allah is Al-Hakeem. He not only knows what is happening, He knows the best way for it to happen. The challenge that we face when it comes to connecting with Al-Hakeem is Allah's hikmah, His wisdom is Lateef. It is subtle at times. And so people will say, like, how is it possible that there's some wisdom in this? And what is the wisdom? The reality is that as human beings, we're very limited in what we can know. Just, that's the human limitation. Al-Hakeem, to believe that Al-Hakeem is the one who in every action, in everything that we see in existence, in every situation that we find ourselves in, that He has a wisdom that may be hidden from us. Alright? There's a saying in Arabic, وَفِعْلُ الْحَكِيمِ لَا يَخْلُو عَنِ الْحِكْمَةِ. The actions of the wise are never void and devoid of wisdom. And just because you don't, and there's another saying in Arabic that وَعَدَمُ الْوِجْدَانِ لَا يَسْتَلْزِمُ عَدَمَ الْوُجُودِ. Just because you can't understand the wisdom does not mean that there is no wisdom. That's an issue with us, that we don't have the ability to understand the wisdom. And Al-Lateef reminds us that that wisdom could be very subtle. And it may take many years for the wisdom of something to become manifest, if it becomes manifest.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
MashaAllah. Allahu Akbar. So I'm left with Al-Khadir.
Wakeel.
طيب كويس ما شاء الله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in the Quran, وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُتَوَكِّلُونَ. Al-Wakeel, subhanallah, for me, when I hear the word and the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Wakeel, Al-Khadir, Al-Hakeem, I always remember the story of Yusuf alayhi salam and the story of Musa alayhi salam. The story of Yusuf alayhi salam. Specifically with Musa, when the mother of Musa is told to place her baby in the cradle and to place that cradle in the water, the amount of trust that she has in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the amount of tawakkul that she has in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the amount of trust that she has in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what is conveyed in some element by the term Al-Wakeel. But the name itself, you think of it in the modern language, when do we use Al-Wakeel? You go to a company and the person that represents that company is called Al-Wakeel. You trust them to represent you. You trust them to act in the best interest. You trust them to be decisive. You trust them to make the decisions that matter at the right time, in the right way, with the right quantity. You trust that person to act on your behalf, and you trust that that person will be able to maintain the growth and predict and project and do all of that. And you trust the authority, and you give respect to that position. And the Wakeel is also, let's say, in some of the schools of fiqh, there are, subhanAllah, 2 or 3 parties that are having those struggles and difficulties. So the person that you choose to represent you, to advocate on your behalf and to fix that situation, you call that person al-Wakeel. The wife, when she's getting married, and she's going to find that person, subhanAllah, or the person that's going to represent her, to act on her best behalf and to make sure that that guy is vetted and to make sure that he deserves that position of being your husband, you give that individual also in some forms a title of Mikaeel. He's the Wakeel, he's the Wali. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that I trust to act on my behalf in the best way possible, to make the decisions that I cannot make in the right time, in the right amount, and in ways that I myself may not understand. That's what should come to mind when you think al-Wakeel.
Well, Tyler, for that answer. That was so much more than we could have expected. And the way you guys tied it together, mashallah, beautiful. For our next question, this question is a little specific, but it's for Sheikh Mikaeel in particular. Sheikh, in your book, you narrate that a close friend of Muhasabi ibn Masruq wrote, whoever does not use his intellect to protect himself from his intellect will be destroyed by his intellect. The way my average brain understood this was to check yourself before you wreck yourself, essentially. Considering this quote, what ways do you see people destroying themselves by not using their intellect, or by letting anxiety and fear overpower their faith in Allah?
I mean, you gave it right there. It's like an alley-oop. I don't know, all I gotta do is push it in now, right? Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. You sure that's in my book? Let me see that a little bit.
We got a lot of book club members here.
Okay.
You just did your book, so
All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Imam Muhasibi, Masruq, he says, whoever doesn't use his intellect to protect himself from his intellect. So what this explains is that every aspect of the human being, when left in balance, will help you reach the goal of ma'rifah, knowing who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, fulfilling the rights of Allah and fulfilling the rights of the people around you. However, what happens is sometimes, depending on our environment or our natural disposition, we may give more strength or work out one part of ourselves more than the other, like those dudes that be skipping leg day all the time. You know what I mean? The idea is for you to be balanced, right? Now listen to this. The intellect is a tool by which you recognize God. I'm going to drop gems on you right now, and please listen closely. The intellect is the tool by which you reach God. But once you reach God, leave the intellect at the door and listen to Him. Let me say that one more time. The intellect, if you don't, in the Quran, Allah always says, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, so that you reach to Him. You use the world as a sign, a dalala, an indication to who He is. Once you have reached God, you can't use intellect now on top of wahi. For example, simple. Allah says pray five salah. One of them is 4, one is 2. Break that down intellectually. Oh, because, if we divide the day by... Nah, be quiet, bro. It's because God told you to. That's it. Stop trying to rationalize all the ahkam. Stop. I'm sorry. You're going to put yourself in... You're going to paint yourself in a corner. La. The reason why we do what we do is because Allah told us to. However, it's different than blind faith, because I used my intellect to arrive at the fact, and you have to do this. I hope I did it as a convert. You have to recognize why you believe in God and come to that understanding that you believe in Allah. You believe He is one, and you believe Him as He is and as He has described Himself, and that you believe Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam The unlettered prophet who had no prior exposure to anything was given this miracle of the Quran from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the logical part that your intellect is used to lead you to Allah. But however, you have to learn how to turn that off sometimes. That's why I said it's like skipping leg day. You forget that this thing that you sharpen so much, there's a point where you got to turn that off. And that's where you say, Sami'na wa ata'na. Sami'na, I hear and I obey. Now, we are intellectual beings. Like I wrote the book and I said, you have to respect, we have to honor that aspect of who we are. And I've had dialogue with many Christians, and this is something that when it comes to their basic aqidah, they turn it off. They don't turn it off in fiqh, where we turn it off. Well, why 4? Because he said 4. They turn it off in belief. Like, why do you believe that? I just believe. Like, whoa. Let me rationally, how did you get to that conclusion? I just have faith. I'm like, well, who wrote your book, Have Faith? I'm like, oh, hold up, bro. Can we slow up? What do you mean have faith? Who wrote your book? It's just, Nah, so intellect, that's all. I don't want to be long-winded. I want the other shuyukh to speak. But that's what it kind of means by use your intellect. Now, I turn it off. I turn it off. Sometimes, I've seen this. You'll be in college, you'll be in class all day. And then you go to Jummah khutbah. Either in the masjid or somewhere else. And when you're hearing nas, like Quran and Sunnah, your critical mind is still on. So the imam is talking, and you've got all day, you've been sitting in class, critiquing stuff, this and that, and you haven't turned that switch off. Now, I'm not saying we're not supposed to think, but there's a point where, when it comes to revelation, I don't know why, but I submit, and hold up, that doesn't even mean you're actually ready to act on all of it yet. There's a lot that I submit is from God, but I'm being real right now. I may not have the strength yet to act on it. Does that ever stop me from admitting that it's from God? Never. We don't like cognitive dissonance. So what we do is we kind of like block it out because I'm not ready to act. La. Say, Ya Allah, this is from you. I'm doing tawbah tonight. Tomorrow, when tomorrow comes, I'll deal with tomorrow. But I'll do tawbah tonight. But that is a sin and I'm weak. But I admit that it's from God. You feel me? So that's what I kind of mean. It's like, use your intellect, be intelligent, look at the signs of God. I actually say we got to become like children again. When's the last time you looked at the clouds and wondered, how does that thing have millions of pounds or thousands of pounds of water in it, but it's floating over my head? I'm sorry, I understand. The biological and the scientific labels we put on stuff doesn't make it cease to be a miracle of God. The name you put on it doesn't make it cease to be a miracle. It's still a miracle. Tell me how thousands of pounds of water are floating above my head right now. Well, okay, cool. It's amazing. MashaAllah. Allahu Akbar. Don't ever stop being amazed at God's creation. I've already spoken. Oh, my bad. Oh, no, go ahead.
Quick thing?
Yeah, please.
Just ask it. I just want to follow up on this. I think you made a really beautiful point.
You might get X'd out slowly, bro.
No. By all means. If I'm completely honest,
I'm just joking.
I just want to make sure that we hear as much from Sheikh Mikaeel before he leaves.
I have a flight, guys, later, so if I leave a little early, forgive me.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that, we get to hear from him. One of the points you mentioned was that as a convert, you had to explore and really ask these questions, engage intellectually. And then you also mentioned that we have to do it.
Yes.
And I sometimes say this in my talks. I'll say that all of us also have to accept Islam. Mm-hmm. Like, you're born into a Muslim family. But that doesn't mean that you have fully submitted. Now, my question would be, for someone who finds himself born into a Muslim family, they grew up just doing whatever everyone's doing, and maybe this is the first time they're hearing this idea.
Yes.
That, I as a we say born Muslim, but born into a Muslim family, I have to accept. What does that look like? How do I do that?
The first, we have to support it with nas. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu aminu. O you who believe, believe. O you who believe, believe. First thing. That's the verse of the Quran. We can get the textual source for that. I can't remember the ayah number off the top of my head. Imam Ghazali, he wrote a whole book called Al-Munqadh min al-Dalal, which is deliverance from error, in which he wrote his what's it called? It's like memoirs of him mentally going out of the box. Mentally like, okay, what do they believe? Okay, and coming back. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi says, this is deep, y'all. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi says, the only one who knows the haqiqah, the reality of anything, is someone that's been inside something and also seen it from the outside. Because when you only seen it from one perspective, you don't actually know what it is. Like, imagine if we were born in this room, and all you saw was this room. Well, you wouldn't know what this room really was like until you walked out of the room and then came back in. Now listen, I am not by any means saying, okay, leave Islam and then come back to Islam. Astaghfirullah. La, you have questions that you've wondered, you needed to know. Now, there are some people that can grow up and never even have those questions come to their mind. Imam Razi said, I die on the deen of the ajuz of my town. I die on the religion of the elderly women in my town. They never had these philosophical questions to answer. Why did God create evil, this and that and the third? They just had simple faith. If you believe in your heart and you know it to be true, you've accepted Islam, you're good. But what we have to respect as a community is the questions that come up in someone's mind that they want an answer to. And we have to honor that question. And alhamdulillah, the resources we have now, who speak English, who know our culture, like, subhanAllah, you have no excuse not to ask questions, whether it be through distance or whether it be with the local shuyukh that you have. So it's about asking the questions if you have them, and that's it, just coming to faith with belief that, no, this is what I believe in, you know? That's what I would say, pretty much, man. Pretty much. Wallahu a'lam. And I would say, don't force it either. There are some people like, well, I never had those questions. I'm like, all right, you're good. You're good. Like, you don't have to force yourself to have doubts in order to, oh, now I know. You know, but if you have questions, you need to ask those questions and get clarification. I think one of the biggest problems that we had in our educational system, Islamic, is Sunday school still teaching the 5 pillars. You got kids doing like AP Calc in high school, but the dude's still learning like 5 pillars of Islam. You need to be reading Razi, dude. You need to be reading Ibn Taymiyyah, who were intellectual masterminds. Any question, I've said this, you read the Quran, any question you have, and someone asks me, 99.9 I've already seen a scholar wrote on the issue. Because we think we're the first ones dealing with issues, but we're not. And so it's all about searching, learning, and yeah, that's it. Inshallah. Allah give us tawfiq. Allah give us tawfiq.
Okay, our next one is a little deep. You might miss your flight if we go for it.
Go for it. Bismillah.
Bismillah. Checks here for us. Loyal. When we go through something that shakes us to our core and sends us to rock bottom, how do we keep faith in Allah? Essentially, do we spend the night praying tahajjud? Do we book an appointment with a counselor? Do we sit in our mom's lap and just let it all out? How do we proceed?
All of the above. Yeah, all of the above, Habibi. Prayer, people, community. That's it. Like, hardships will hit us. They'll rock us. They'll be difficult. We need brothers and sisters that are there for that we can just cry on. Listen. The Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam got revelation. Y'all know the story. He ran down the mountain. His heart was shaking. He was trembling. He ran to her arms. Meaning, he didn't try to handle it on his own. He went to someone else's arms to hold him. Right? This is prophetic masculinity I'm talking about here. She held him. And she didn't even ask him first. The Hadith of Bukhari says she held him until sakana. He calmed down. You know, if something's going crazy, everybody's like, what happened? What happened? You like, chill. Like, I'm trying to like. She didn't do that. She just held him. Hatta he calmed down. And when he calmed down, she said, tell me what happened. And he started to tell her. And then he says, لَقَدْ خَشِيتُ عَلَى نَفْسِي, vulnerability. He goes, I'm scared. See, articulating that. Do you know how much it relieves off your shoulders when it's your brother, it's your friend, it's a close person. And the moment you get it off your tongue and you go, I'm scared, you'll feel a burden lifted. Because you were able to articulate it. You were able to say it. And then she becomes the rock in that moment. She goes, Kalla, no. And sometimes you need a friend that just does that for you. No, everything's going to be all right. Don't worry. Stop. I'm serious. You need that friend. What? You get my point, right, Shay? You need that friend. And I told you in my talk, it takes 8 minutes to take someone out from a very dark place. Give them the time that they need. So when we get shaken, how do we keep faith? Well, listen, one more thing. It's muscle memory, yo. Game day, listen. Game day is the musibah. But the minor inconveniences of life are practice. Do you feel what I'm trying to say? Don't expect to do perfect on game day if you haven't been practicing tawakkul and sabr in the minor small inconveniences that life throws at you. So when the small stuff happens, like small, hatta shawki, shakwa, hatta the Prophet ﷺ said even a thorn pricks you. That thorn is nothing, but it's an opportunity to practice sabr, tawakkul, holding yourself. Then when calamities hit, they will hit you. But you've been practicing. One more thing. There's a book I recommend. Before you read this after you read my next book, though. Okay. The book is called Sustenance of the Soul by Malik Badri. Well, he translated an old book. Malik Badri, rahimahullah, is a Sudanese father of Islamic psychology. Rahimahullah, he passed away 7 years ago or so? 7 years ago or so. Father of Islamic psychology. He was woke before everybody was woke. Amazing. Anyways, he wrote a book called Sustenance of the Soul. It's free on Kindle. It's free on Kindle. In that book, he says the way you deal with calamities is you allow yourself to be comfortable with small minor inconveniences. So that when the calamity actually hits, you're ready. Then he says one more thing. Here we go. Now this takes practice and you may need someone licensed to help you do this exercise, but I'm going to teach it to you. Listen closely. They say the nature of the dunya is that there will be difficulties. In the times of ease and comfort, remind yourself about the nature of the dunya. Are y'all with me? Listen to what I'm saying. But you got to be careful because if you obsess on this, you'll destroy the joy of the moment that Allah wants you to experience. So that's why I say you might actually need someone to help you through this process. But I'm going to drop it on you. So you're chilling, right? Everything's good, grades were good, life is, you're just in afia. You're like, alhamdulillah. Remember in your heart, but don't obsess on it, that there's ups and downs. Just remember there's ups and downs. But don't try to remember it on the down. You won't be able to. You got to remember it when you're up. Just remember there's ups and downs. Then when the down comes, you're like, I already knew, homie, you was around the corner. Because I already knew, yo, bro, I already knew you was in the cut. So you feel what I'm saying? It's profound advice. But what the problem is, just so I can break this down, if you start obsessing, then you start to remove the joy of your life. You're with your family, everything's good, you're in the corner crying, you're like, what's wrong? Like, this is all going away one day. I didn't tell you to do that. I said to pause and reflect on the fact that there's ups and downs. So when the down hits, you're like, I saw you coming. And you smile. And you're like, you will pass too. Because when the down comes, I already knew there's an up right around the corner. You feel me?
Powerful, Sheikh. I can't follow anything off that. Please make dua for us, Sheikh. We can't thank you enough. He has a long flight coming up, so keep in your dua and safe travels. Jazakumullah khairan. So this one is from the audience, inshallah. Sheikh, how do you know that you've done enough to trust? How do you know you've done enough? That you've trusted in Allah's plan enough and that you've done enough versus when you are not doing enough?
Okay, so just to repeat the question. The question is, how do you know when you've done enough versus when you should keep trying? That's a good question. How many of y'all think that's a good question? How did I end up with all the difficult questions today? You guys saw that? Subhanallah. No, I mean, Sheikh Mikaeel's not easy either, but yeah. I guess it's a big master thing. Y'all just ask difficult questions. MashaAllah. Okay. So, I would say that when it comes to making effort, and an individual should try to exhaust all halal means that you have when you're trying for something. Right? All the halal means that you have at your disposal to use them. Once you've tried all the different things that are out there that are halal for you to try to accomplish something, and you still find that you're not able to move forward. We could say up until now, what have you done? You've been tying your camel, really trying. The next thing I would say is to consult with someone. This is a practice that maybe we need to revive in our communities, the practice of shura, consultation. And to consult with people who are people of insight, people of wisdom. Right? And this is where I think we really struggle, is we're constantly reinventing the wheel. Because we ignore generational wisdom. There are people before us who have experienced similar things, who've been through things. They could often offer us some advice in those situations. But we don't ask. Either because we just think we'll do it ourselves, or we don't trust generational wisdom. So in the loss of generational wisdom, we're left to try to figure it out ourselves. And so at a certain point, and that's where the decision is difficult, but you have to make a decision. And that's where consultation helps. It gives you another perspective, where someone says, you've tried, you've done everything in your power, maybe it's time to consider something else. Maybe it's time to consider something else. If there's no reason for you to stay fixated on this option in your life, because you've tried everything, and nothing was working, the idea that, well, but I want it, so I'm going to hang on to it. Now you're not actually working towards tying your camel, because you've done everything you could. There's no indication that this would become easier for you. Maybe it's time to start considering other options. Do you understand? Look, the reality is, there's never going to be a guarantee from God saying, yes, it's time to switch. This door is shut. You're going to have to do your best to try to go through that door in life. You're going to ask other people, have I done enough? Is there anything else that I could do here? What do you think, from your perspective, where the person's hopefully more objective? Right? Because you want it. So sometimes you're blinded by your desire for it. And you don't want to give it up. Like you really want to go through that door. And if you can get someone else who's more objective, less emotionally invested, they come along and say, hey, there's really not much hope for this to work out. It's time maybe to put your energy towards other options. As painful as that can be, to turn away from that door, it may be necessary. And we have to identify, am I holding on to this door because I really believe it's possible to go through it? Or am I holding on to it just because I don't want to give up on the possibility? And that's where you have to be honest with yourself. Because sometimes there's a moment where you have to move on. Right? And that moment is not, and I can't give you a clear definition of do this and then you know for sure move on. That's the best that I have.
Yeah, please.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. I'm so proud and humbled to see all of you here. It's such an amazing, mashallah, sight. May Allah reward you and keep it sincere and bless you and make it fruitful. Just to add on to what Sheikh Uthman mentioned, may Allah bless him and give him the best in dunya and akhirah. Ya Rabb, ameen, ameen, ameen. I always think, when it comes to the question of when have I done enough, I always remember, subhanAllah, when Hajar was told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Ibrahim alayhi salam, this is what Allah has asked, for you to stay back. So what did she do? She stayed in the desert, but she didn't just sit there waiting for things to manifest. No, she hustled. And I want you to remember the ayat in Surah Al-Najm. وَأَن لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى وَأَنَّ سَعْيَهُ سَوْفَ يُرَى. You will not get except what you work for, and everything you work for, you shall see the reward of. Allahu Akbar. Everything you work for, you shall see the reward of. If it works out, that's your reward. If it doesn't work out, you get rewarded for the intention. So what did she do? She hustled back and forth between Safa and Marwa 7 times until she was exhausted. And when she was exhausted, she put everything that she has. She laid down on the ground. She could not breathe anymore. She could not move anymore. She could not hustle anymore. She's exhausted herself. That's when this scratch happens and Zamzam is born. And notice, it's not her scratch. She's not the one who brings about Zamzam in the 2 narrations, either the angel or her son. To remind her that your effort gets you to a point, but it's not just your effort. You will always need the intervention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when do you know you've done enough? When you've exhausted every possible means, and you're on the ground, you can't breathe anymore, you're like, Wallahi ya Rabb, I've done my best. Things will happen at that moment. Or, like the Prophet ﷺ, when he was coming back from Taif, he's knocked on every possible door, every possible tribe, and now he's sitting under the tree. Ya Allah, I don't know why this is not working, but as long as you're happy with me, I'm okay to struggle for as long as you expect and you want me to. But if there's better, show me the way out. That same time, Allah takes him to the journey of Isra and Mi'raj. So when the doors of the world close in your face, the doors of heaven will open to you. And what happens when he's going on that journey of Isra and Mi'raj? Jibreel tells him, look down, there is the place that you would call home, Medina. So Allah will show you where your home is, where you belong, as long as you've reached a point where you're saying, Ya Allah, I don't know what to do from here, but I've done the best that I can. I've taken every possible means. If this is not meant to be, show me the other place, the other way. And you say it with conviction because you've tried your best. Allah will show you the other way. And sometimes, like Shaykh Uthman mentioned, sometimes you keep knocking on so many doors to open, but you forget there's a door right in front of you that Allah has created for you. So you're trying to go through somebody else's door, but your door has been there all along. I'll give you a personal experience. One of the things, subhanAllah, that I was trying to do early on is I was trying to get into med school. And subhanAllah, finally when I got med school, the offer, right? I showed it to my mom. I was like, Mom, here you go. Now you're happy, alhamdulillah. Okay, now I want to go through the door that I think Allah has meant for me to go through. She said, what do you mean? I want to do da'wah. I want to go into da'wah. I want to inspire and teach and I love Islam. That's what I'm very passionate about. And it's been there for since I was 8 years old. I'm knocking on all these doors. Live for do, as the Egyptians say. You run around and you circle, you do Kaaba, Tawaf, in so many places. And then you realize, subhanAllah, where you're meant to be. So sometimes you have to know when doors shut in your path, it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has and expects you to be somewhere else where there's going to be better yield and better impact. And wallah, every single time that I've made that decision since then, of going into da'wah, the community drives you crazy sometimes. So you know what, I'm done with this, I'm just going to go to med school, khalas, finish my degree, open up my own practice, and not worry about it. Every single time I've made that intention, whether I like it or not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pushes you, sends you a sign to show you where you're supposed to be. Wallahi, every single time. To a point now, I've accepted my faith. Alhamdulillah. I am where you expect me to be. And that's where, inshallah, and all of us, knock, doors shut, Allah will give you that which is better. And taraka shay'in la ya'ala Allah khairan minhu.
So these next 2 questions are for you. We're going to do a little combo. So for the first one, from the perspective of us, Allah, I'm a first-year student and I'm drowning in anxiety about my future. I'm a 19-year-old not knowing what career to choose. I'm a graduate who's been searching for a job to no avail. How should we trust in Allah's plan when there's so much uncertainty? How do we navigate this uncertainty? And sub-point, is the level of the tawakkul of the prophets that we spoke about, is that level possible for us to achieve as regular people?
Okay, I want to begin with the last question, and then we'll go to the second question. The Prophet ﷺ, he's sitting with the companions, and one of the companions comes to him and says, Ya Rasulullah, whenever we are in your presence and in your midst, our iman is so high. And the minute we go out into our companies, into our friendships, our iman seems to just plummet. So what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Sa'a wa sa'a. An hour and an hour. Meaning, you're a product of your environment. It's okay to have some time where iman is high. It's okay to have some time where iman is low. Now most of us end the hadith there. Brother, I want to chill, relax, an hour here, an hour with my friends, an hour in the community. But the hadith continues where the Prophet ﷺ says, but if you were to hold on to what I have given you, you would reach a point in your conviction where the angels themselves would shake hands with you. Metaphorically. Imagine the angels. When you see someone and you're so proud of what they did? Like, I can imagine, subhanAllah, the angels that are writing the record. When Yusuf was tempted by Imrat al-Aziz and he passed that test, I can imagine the angels are like, MashaAllah, this was amazing, may Allah bless you. It's the hadith where when somebody is humble, the angels actually place their wings at the head of that person and they say, oh Allah, increase this person in honor, increase that person in dignity because they were humble. So when you ask me the question, can I reach the level of tawakkul of the prophets and the messengers? You can't reach it. You can't actualize it, but you can come very, very close to it. And this is what we need to think about. We need to aspire to that. A lot of us, unfortunately, I feel like in the community, we baby our youth so much. We focus so much on let's try to be as accommodating as possible, that we sometimes don't give people the encouragement and the precursors to allow them to aspire for the best. And there are many examples of this. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, you shall go through test after test after test after test after test until you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a state where you're almost sinless. So every test makes you what? Makes you more pure, purified. A lot of us, what we do is we pass the test and then we have a plummet. We pass the test and then we drop again. We pass the test and we drop again. But if we were to build on cumulatively across all of those tests and we're to be determined and persistent, our slips are going to be much shorter. Our slips are going to be much shorter as decline points and also as durations. And we're going to begin to be less inclined towards dunya and less what? And less also our tests begin to be not in the major sins, not in the subtleties that we talk about. Allah begins to purify us even in the subtleties. And one of the images that I remember my teacher sharing with me, he says, think of yourself, think of your heart as a burger. When you're cooking a burger, what do? You flip that burger. You make sure every side is cooked. So sometimes what happens is life has made you cook in specific areas, with a lot of uncooked parts. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do if He wills for you to be purified? He flips the realities or the situations for you. Puts you in a very different environment to ensure that you actually that you cook and you improve and you get better in that way. So welcome the tests when they come as opportunities to be raised. As long as you're doing your best, when a test comes your way, like the companions used to say, we don't panic when a test comes to us. We actually panic when things are going easy because Allah loves those, or Allah tests those whom He loves the most. So look at every test as an opportunity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be purified and do the best that you can with what Allah has given you. But yes, you can come very close to the levels of the companions. As a matter of fact, I'll finish with this. The Prophet ﷺ says, there will come a time when one of the people of Islam will reach and will get the ajr of 50 of the companions. They said, Ya Rasulullah, did you mean the other way around? Like, we get 50 times the ajr of the people that come later? He said, no, I meant they will get 50 times the ajr of you. They said, Ya Rasulullah, why? He says, because they have nobody to support them when you have people to support you. So the next time you are in a place where you're the only person that is ready to get up and pray, and there's nobody else to support you, and you feel shy getting out of that class, or you feel socially stigmatized, or you feel like you're going to be ostracized or judged when everybody else is drinking something and you feel like you're the odd one out, there's no support system, it's not the social norm, it's not acceptable. and it takes a lot of courage and guts to be the person that is different, to stand out from the crowd. Remember, at that time, you get 50 times the ajr of Abu Bakr, and 50 times the ajr of Umar, and 50 times the ajr of Uthman, 50 times the ajr of Ali, because you chose to be different. Now imagine, not only in getting close to that level of the Prophet and the Messenger, but even in the reward, you can get close and sometimes even, subhanAllah, outdo in ajr the level of the companions. That's what we should aspire for. May Allah make us from those of ihsan, ya Rabb, ameen. And what was the second question very quickly? Then I won't speak again for like 10 minutes. It's all you share. No. Sharing is caring.
I'm for sure gonna remember that burger analogy.
The next time, quickly remember, ask yourself which part of me is uncooked, mashallah.
Second question was to paint the picture. I'm a first year student drowning in anxiety about my future. I'm a 19-year-old not knowing what career to choose. I'm a graduate who's been searching for a job to no avail. So much uncertainty in every option. How do we have tawakkul? What practical steps do we take when there's just a plethora of options and not many answers?
You know, Shaykh, the hadith, remember the hadith? If you were to have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as you should, you would be like the bird that goes out in the morning, not knowing where it's going to get its food, but still goes out to look and to search either way. That's the attitude. You have to put yourself out there. And I recently had a sister ask a question. She was like, Sheikh, I'm shy to speak to people in the community to let them know that I want to get married. I'm shy to tell people that, hey, this is my profile. I'm shy to send other sisters my picture. I'm shy to let people know that I want to get married. I respect that. May Allah bless you, bless your modesty. But you have to put yourself out there in the halal. Huh? In the halal. I don't know, I'm looking at Tim, Sheikh. I know you're married. You know, Sheikh, you're cornered between Sheikh Mikaeel and we're bullies, man. May Allah forgive us. So you have to put yourself out there, but you have to do it in the halal. You have to do it in the halal. Wallah, there's so many doors of khair out there. But you know what? You can't be sitting at home like lazy. Go and hustle. Hustle. Knock on every door possible. Every door will open up another door. Every door will open up another door. And before you know it, the right door will open. And the right channel will, subhanAllah, unfold. That's the short answer. So just go out every morning. Ya Allah, my intention today is to find the right position, the right job. And look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow that to manifest in the most unexpected ways possible. As long as you commit to khair, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَالِغُ أَمْرِهِ قَدْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدْرًا. What does it mean? وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Whoever has tawakkul on Allah, Allah will be enough. إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَالِغُ أَمْرِهِ. Allah will allow His command to come to be. Allah will allow that man, that woman's desire to come to be fulfilled. قَدْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدْرًا. And every door, or every command, every will, every desire, there's a path to get to it. Right? There's a path to get to it. So look, knock, Allah will show you the way. And I can tell you stories, so many stories. Can I just share one story, Sheikh? One story, very quickly. And then I won't talk for 15 minutes. 15 minutes. SubhanAllah. I'll give you an example, guys. SubhanAllah. There's a brother that I know. There's a brother that I know. He was struggling with, looking for a job, looking for a wife. He came to the Sheikh. If only I'm able to get a job, get a wife, get a house, I would be the happiest man alive. You know what? It was in Ramadan. Make dua, go and hustle. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and reward you. Long story short, he would come to the masjid every day for Fajr. And he would spend an hour after Fajr just making dua. He would pray shuruq after sunrise, and then he would go out and he would ask people, hey, which person is hiring, which person is hiring, and he would go knock on every one of those restaurants, every one of those individuals that he knows, giving his resume, asking this and this and this and that. He kept doing this, subhanAllah, for 6 months. Until finally he's now in the masjid crying, Ya Allah, I've tried everything. So this guy is sitting next to me, like, why are you crying? It's like, I'm looking for a job, and life is difficult, you know, one thing, this, He's like, you're looking for a job, what else? A house, what else? And he's like, a wife too. He's like, mashallah, tabarakallah. Wallahi, he ends up marrying that man's daughter, working for him, and buying a house through him. He got the three things in one guy. And he's hustled, knocked at every door possible, comes back to the masjid, and the guy was asking him, he ends up like, some of you like, I'm going to Fajr from now on. Does she have sisters? She does.
Sounds awfully like the story of Musa.
Okay. It seems like Sheikh Hosam gave the recipe right there, right? MashaAllah. That's beautiful. I wanted to just add something here. And I mentioned this earlier, for those of you who were able to make it to the 11 a.m. stand-up comedy. So essentially, what I wanted to add here, and I mentioned at that time that one of the challenges that we all are going to face in life is to learn to tolerate our own discomfort with uncertainty. In life, you will always find situations, and you will face situations that are uncertain by nature. And that there's nobody who can give you a guarantee, a true guarantee. Right? We were talking about in the context of marriage. Right? The idea that I have an absolute guarantee that I know who this person is. You'll just never get that. So then what really becomes the question is, what is it going to take for you to become comfortable with the uncertainty that you're facing in your life? And here's where, obviously, in our religion we are taught to trust Allah. Trust that whatever's happening, as difficult as it is, and as dark as it looks, to trust that light is where in the tunnel? MashaAllah, y'all want to listen to Sheikh Mikaeel? It's in the tunnel. And let's try to explore this a little bit more. Because here's my question to you. How many of y'all understand that in situations of uncertainty, our religion teaches you and me to trust God? How many of y'all know that? You've heard that over and over again. Here's my question. Why is it so hard? We know what to do. We just can't bring ourselves to do it. My question to you is, why can't you trust? Now, here's a few things, and I want to get to one really important one. One is, maybe we don't know who God is. Maybe we don't know who Allah is. To trust someone, you need to know who they are and know that they are trustworthy. Know that they're trustworthy. That's why you don't just take advice from just anybody. Right? You don't just hand over your affairs to just anybody. It's like someone that, okay, who do you trust in your life? Here's a question. Who do you trust? And what are the qualities of those people? Number one, they know what they're talking about, right? You don't trust people that don't know what they're talking about. Sometimes you do. When it comes to like marriage advice from unmarried people, like I said earlier, right? You trust people. No. So, the point I'm making is what? We trust people who know what they're talking about. That's what's called deferring to authority, right? Someone's an authority in something, we trust them. They know what they're talking about. Or they know better than us, at least, right? They know better than us. That's one. Number two, that they are trustworthy. That they have your best interests at heart. You can have some... Why is it that a lot of people don't trust experts? Recently we had, and I won't say it, a big situation where, mashallah, there was a big political divide between, do you trust the experts Do you follow the science? We acknowledge that these are experts. It's like, but no, they sold out to the government. And you got people, you understand? It's not enough to just know. It's, can you trust the person who knows? Now here's my question. Why is it that you could struggle to trust God? One is maybe that you don't know who He is. What if you've even learned about Allah? You've taken a course example where you learned about the 99 names of Allah. And so you know, theoretically, that God is absolutely trustworthy. He deserves to be trusted. I want to throw an idea at you. And I think this can be very useful if you can run with this a little bit. It's the idea of what's called the God image. Anyone ever heard of this idea of a God image? I know it sounds blasphemous, but like, y'all ever heard of that idea? I want to refer you to an article. It's called Cosmic Cop or Loving Lord. How many of y'all read that article? Anyone? It's on Yaqeen Institute's website. Cosmic Cop or Loving Lord. How parenting and your upbringing affects how you view God. This is very important. If you grew up and you could not trust your parents, and it was your parents who introduced you to Allah, you know, we use a term that's a little condescending, but it does, describe what I'm talking about. We say people have trust issues. They haven't ever experienced a trustworthy person among their guardians, people that they felt safe around, people that they felt comfortable sharing with. Every time they shared something and the mom or dad told them, well, we won't tell anybody to share with us, they told all the relatives, right? And then you're like, man, who can I trust in my life? And you go forward, or maybe you've had your heart broken really bad, and now you find it hard to trust the people around you. It's a defensive mechanism. Psychologically then, you don't put yourself in that position to be burnt. It becomes very challenging to trust Allah. We begin to impose on Allah our views of the people around us that we cannot trust. And I have had, and this is just my understanding, many conversations with people who I realized they projected onto Allah. They say, why would Allah do this to me? Why this? And they're really attacking Allah, but it's really just a displacement of their frustration. Their parent is mistreating them. They feel like they can't do anything to their parent or address it with their parent, so they displace it upon Allah. And say, why would Allah put me in this situation? Why would He give me this parent? They can't trust Allah. But it's really rooted in their inability to trust the people around them. That's why not every spiritual problem is purely spiritual. So many times people mask the issue in spiritual terms. Yeah, I don't know why Allah, and it's all about Allah, because you can blame people, but they might speak back to you and say don't blame me. The easiest one is Allah. With all may Allah forgive us. Then we'll just complain about Him and we'll blame Him, and we displace. Sheikh Mikaeel was saying earlier what? It was a harsh statement, right? Hard to swallow. What did he say? Don't blame Allah for where your tax dollars are being paid, are being spent. Right? You say, why is Allah doing that when you, or me, all of us here, our tax dollars are being spent on that destruction? So, to summarize, if you find it hard to trust Allah, after having learnt about Allah, you may want to explore your ability to trust, psychologically speaking. In general. Because we generalize. If we feel we can't trust anyone, like a few people in our lives who are expected to be trustworthy, we generalize, I will trust nobody. And we even sometimes extend that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the cognitive distortion in CBT. And I'll reference another book here that might help some of you who deal with this. There's a book called Your Lord Has Not Forsaken You. Y'all know about this book? Yes. Again, published by Yaqeen Institute. Your Lord Has Not Forsaken You. It's written by, I want to say Sarah Sultan and Najwa Awad. Right. They wrote this book where they highlight 10 cognitive distortions. And how those cognitive distortions, which are psychological ideas, can actually affect your religion. And so when we talk about trusting God, It may not be just weak iman. It may be psychologically, you have this barrier and built up, this armor that you think protects you, so you don't trust anybody. That extends to not trusting God. Then you're left to deal with the uncertainty all by yourself. Does that make sense? All right, sorry about that. I really took off, but I wanted to really highlight this point of the fact of the role that psychology plays in how we view God and trust Him.
It's not 15 minutes yet.
Right, so who wants to support me after I just got bullied, y'all? Who wants to hold me? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, طيب, while we look at one of the questions, when Sheikh Mikaeel was speaking, there was one point, subhanAllah, that came to mind. When we talk about our intellect leading us to Allah, but it's not enough, and it's actually limited sometimes in having a genuine relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I want you to think about this. A lot of people think in human terms, and they turn worship into self-worship. So you ask a lot of people who are hyper-critical and hyper-intellectual, why do you pray? And in trying to speak to intellectual circumstances, we give a very intellectual answer. So we say, prayer is very good for the back, I read the study, it's really wonderful for your metabolism. Apparently, there are these positions in yoga, it's really good for this, it's really good for that. Mentally, it's amazing, it's a really good psychological tool, it's a great coping mechanism. There's social benefits to prayer, you meet people, you can find your White House and alright? And you give a very, very intellectual answer. You ask people, why do you fast? I fast because it's socioeconomically advantageous, it makes me feel the struggle of the poor. I fast because it's good for my immune system, it resets my immune system. I fast because it is blah, 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 blah. We give very intellectual answers. Why do you go to Hajj? It's the biggest convention in the world, it's a great opportunity to meet people. So we do this to our faith, we do this to our deen, we do this to our deen. But very few people, when you ask them, why do you fast? Because I love Allah. Why do you pray? Because I love Allah. Why do you go to Hajj? Because I look forward to meeting Allah. And there's a difference between intellect taking you there, but the relationship is determined by love. And this is the problem in a very hyper-critical world, a hyper-intellectual world. We often like to focus on the evidence, the research, and it's important. But you have to have a separation between those two. And I'll give you an example. You ask somebody, why do you take your mother out for dinner every week? And the person says, I read in a research paper that if you take your mother out for dinner every week, the chances of her leaving inheritance for you when she dies is 700 times more likely in the case of 1, 2, 3. If you are from Japan, it's actually 800 times more likely. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. You think this person is I don't want to mash it, yeah? Heartless, yeah? But if you ask that person, why do you take your mother out for dinner? And they say, because I love my mother. That's the relationship you want to have with Allah. And it's difficult to have that relationship if you've been deprived of love and you've been conditioned to think only in critical and intellectual ways. And that's why same kind of thinking, I say to a husband and a wife, when you get married, you check the philosophy at the door. You don't come and have philosophical conversation. Or even the Quran and the Sunnah guide you, but they do so in very subtle manners. The minute you have to talk to your wife and say, قال الله وقال الرسول, the Prophet says this, the Messenger said that, Allah says this, you've actually already lost a part of the relationship. You've already lost a part of the relationship. Instead of that, it should be more about, I appreciate, I understand where you're coming from, and how can I work with you, and how can we have a conversation about the Quran and the Sunnah, not in a way where you feel abused, limited, disrespected, but in a way that you feel empowered, supported, and cared for. And that's what it means to have a relationship based on love, not only a relationship based on the intellect. Because human beings are not only intellectual beings. And I'll give you another example, right? You know, there's always an emotional component that many times masks our intellectual, you know, blah, 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 blah. We give a lot of intellectual blah, 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 but it's actually an emotional. I'll give you an example. It's better understood for an example. So, you meet Abdullah comes to you as a sheikh. So Abdullah wants to convince you to talk to his mom about why marrying Jessica is the best decision in the world. So what does he say? Sheikh, I met her. We are very compatible. We took a personality test. She's this, I'm that. She studies commerce, I study psychology. We have this amazing thing. We're going to build this institution together. You know, her parents are this, my parents are that, blah, 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 blah. He's giving a very intellectual conversation, giving logical answers. Now, if you tell Abdullah, Habibi Abdullah, please just stop for a second and tell me why you actually want to marry her. Tell me honestly why. What's Abdullah going to say? She's pretty. She's cute. I like the freckles on her face. Okay. Wallah, I actually had a conversation with a brother who said that. Again, after all the intellectual gymnastics, these are based on anecdotal evidences. Right? Because he likes the freckles on her face. I'm like, Jazakallah khair for sharing. May Allah bless you and her. But often there are, just like there are emotional reasons that gravitate us or push us towards a specific decision, and then we mask and we do all of these intellectual things to cover it up, the same thing works in a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not only an action of the mind, it's an action of the heart. And you don't suspend the mind. Actually, sometimes what you have to do is like go from a gear to another gear. You just have to make that jump of adding the heart in the conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, when talking about the Quran, what does he say? عَلَى قَلْبِكَ لِتَكُونَ مِنَ نزله على قلبك لتكون من مرسلين. طيب, mashallah. That's right. That's the one, right? So Allah is talking about the Quran, and He says what? He says, we revealed it into your hearts. The Quran was revealed by Allah into the heart of Rasulullah. Yes, there's tadabbur, there's reflection, there's presence intellectually, but the place of taqwa and the place of the heart of the Quran is in the heart. And the heart needs to be engaged in that process.
I know we're getting a little antsy, but mashallah, I don't know if you guys are appreciating it as much as I am. We're getting Islamic knowledge, we're getting psychology, we're getting some cooking classes, so very advice. So inshallah, we got some exciting questions. We're going to go till like 15, if that's okay with you guys.
Sure, yeah.
So we'll take a quick one and then one more from the audience, inshallah.
Sure.
So this one is for Sheikh Rahman. Sheikh, I know I'm supposed to rely on Allah to find my right spouse, but how do I go practically about that? Is it not in our hands to find the right person? We just want to know, should we or should we not be going to all the marriage lectures in the Jannah GT?
Right. Okay. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
We know that we're supposed to rely on Allah when finding the right spouse, but how do we go practically about that, differentiating whether or not it's in our hands or whether or not we should say that?
Yeah, the question presents as a dichotomy of, you know, the effort I put in versus it's in the hands of Allah, it's in the control of Allah. Okay, number one, that dichotomy is where the issue lies. It's not a matter of one or the other, it's a matter of both. It's a matter of both. And it's I'm going to kind of repeat some of what I said in the first question that I answered, which was that, well, you have to do, as Sheikh Hosam put it, you have to put yourself out there. And you have to make an effort with the halal means you have to try to find someone. Now, there's a few misconceptions I want to address, because I've actually had multiple people ask this, not here, but in the past. I've had, people tell me that their family tells them, you need to marry this person, and if you don't marry this person, you're rejecting your nasib. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Where your parents, example, or someone in your family set up on you marrying so-and-so. And they tell you that you have to marry so-and-so because otherwise you're rejecting your nasib. That is a misapplication of the concept of the divine decree. To say that this is what's written for you. Excuse me? How does any human know what's written for anybody? Allah knows what's written for all of us. I don't know what's written for my kids. Right? My parents did not know what was written for me. So the reason I mentioned that is because we're not meant to operate as though there is a decision that I just need to wait to fall into my lap. Or someone recently asked that question as well, which is, well, if it's written for me, it'll just come to me. If it's written for me, it'll come to me. Well, if we're completely honest, if you apply that philosophy to all of life, then you shouldn't be at McMaster. You shouldn't get a job. Because whatever's written for you will come to you. We understand that there's an effort that's required in every other aspect of our life. But right, sometimes when we get frustrated because things aren't working out the way we want them to work out, then we begin to say, what? Well, I'm going to give up putting effort in. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And that's never the right approach, to just give up effort. Just like when someone's struggling to find a job. They're applying. The way of finding a job is not to stop applying. Because up until now you face rejection. It's to keep applying. Because that is what is expected of you. And so to keep putting effort in, acknowledging that it's not always going to happen on your schedule. And that's sometimes our entitlement acting up in relation to God. We feel like, Ya Allah, because I put this much effort in, I deserve it to work out. No one deserves anything. And I'm sorry, it's a little blunt to say that, but we don't deserve anything with Allah. Everything, He's Al-Wahhab, everything He gives us is a gift that we're not deserving of. And so what our responsibility is, not knowing what's written for us, is to consistently make an effort. Consistently make an effort and not give up hope. Does that make sense? Now, does the question have any nuance there beyond just keep working? Like someone said, one of the questions was, at the very ending was, well, should I attend all the marriage programs in the GTA then? Is that like how I should approach this? And I would say, no, that's not what you need to do. I'm going to say something that's going to be a little, it might poke you a little bit, okay? And I know you're like, dude, you do that all the time, you need to chill. No, but like, I think sometimes we need it, and may Allah help us. Sometimes we are our own greatest obstacle. You know, I have a lot of people come to me and they'll complain about, there's no good girls out there. Or, where are the good guys? One of my teachers used to say, man, if nobody meets your standard, maybe something's wrong with your standards. No, and I'm not trying to say, look, you are entitled to hold whatever standard you want. You can hold it all. But then if it's not working out, you might want to check your standard. You might want to check what your role is. I'm not trying to blame you, eh? If it's not working out for you or something right now, and you're like, shit, man, that's the last thing I need to hear. I understand. It's tough. It's not working out for you, but it does help to do some introspection. Could I approach this a different way? I'll give you an example. I have seen people approach the courting process of trying to get to know somebody, and they're projecting their trauma. I've seen this so many times. The brother's asking her something, and she starts to draw lines like, no, and I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with this. And she starts to draw all these lines with him. And he starts to get scared away. Like, whoa, she seems like she's a control freak. And he backs off. Sometimes they're both acting from a place of trauma. He doesn't recognize that sometimes people will draw lines and they're not trying to be a control freak. Maybe that's all he's ever experienced, is someone in his life, or people in his life, who every time they drew lines, it was to control him, example. And sometimes why is she setting all those boundaries? Not even necessarily because she believes that she wants to live by those boundaries, but just so that he gets the message, you can't control me. Like I had a sister come to me say this. She said, Sheikh, I told this brother one time, I questioned him, I pushed him really hard, I told him no. And then he got scared away. Sheikh, I didn't mean it like that. I'm like, but you said it. And he's gonna take it like that. She's like, I just don't want him to feel like he can walk all over me. I said, I get it. But you're not being balanced in your approach then. You're acting from a place of trauma. And so sometimes we bring our trauma to the table and we're holding ourselves back. And that's where healing, I know you're like, dude, you bring everything back to psychology. I know. When you got a hammer, everything's a nail. You know what I'm saying? I can't help it. But I truly believe that this does lie at the core of a lot of what we're seeing around us. Is people are approaching the situations and they're a little imbalanced in their approach. And for me, the issue is that they don't even see the imbalance. So they just think everybody else is wrong. And I'm not saying that there are not, people out there that do approach marriage in not the best way. That definitely exists. But if you cannot find a single decent person, it might be a sign that you could look inside a little bit. Do you understand what I'm saying here? Like, I'm not trying to blame you. I'm trying to say there's a lot to gain from reevaluating your perspective, your stance, and your approach. Does that make sense? Do y'all still feel attacked by what I said? No? Yeah? Okay. All right, guys. Is that cool?
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Moral of the story is don't give up. Keep going. Okay, this one is general one. Inshallah, we'll end it on this. And we'll start Sheikh Hosam. When you feel like you are about to commit a sin, which verse reminds you and averts you from doing that sin?
When you feel like you're about to commit a sin, which ayah of the Quran averts you from that sin? The problem is, when you're about to commit a sin, it's usually a result of being in a state where you are distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's hard to actually remember an ayah of the Quran when you're in that position. Because you're so overcome by whatever may be temptation, desire, ego, that it's difficult in that time to remember the ayat of the Quran. So you actually have to take a step back and draw barriers and boundaries that prevent. I have a personal theory, okay? This is my personal theory. And I'm reading through the literature to see if there's backing. I've seen some, but I can't fully root it in the tradition yet. And my personal theory, subhanAllah, there are many ayat and hadith that can corroborate, but I still don't think I can claim it as a tradition yet. I think that sin happens as a way for us to realize that we're far away from Allah and as a reason to push us to be closer to Allah. So sin is actually a symptom of distance in your relationship with Allah. And there are many ayats in the Quran to back that up. For example, إِنَّ عِبَادِي لَيْسَ لَكَ عَلَيْهِمْ سُلْطَانٌ. Shaitan will not be able to actually have power or the ability to affect those who are committed to Allah, the true slaves of Allah. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ تَذَكَّرُوا. The people of taqwa, as soon as a ta'if, a small wave, So what happens is Shaitan is doing a little tawaf, trying to find the place where to enter from, and he's just poking to see which one is going to work today. Today we're going to try the door of fitna. Didn't work. Money? No. Okay. Fame? No. Instagram? TikTok? So trying. So Allah says, when they feel that Shaitan is poking, right away, تَذَكَّرُوا. They remember. فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. And because they remember, they see clearly. So you want to move them to a point where you are aware of when Shaitan is knocking, testing the entrance points. Not when he's already entered, you're chilling, and now he's drawing the ideas and the pictures in your head. But there has to be a step below that or before that. And when you're in that step, what ayat of the Quran? Because Allah says, tadakkaru, they remember. So what is the dhikr? Quran is the dhikr, the best dhikr. So what are the ayat of the Quran? Personally, there are a few ayat that I like to play in my mind when I'm in a situation like that. Number one, Allah says, فَلَا تَعْلَمُ نَفْسٌ مَا أُخْفِيَ لَهُم مِّن قُرَّةِ أَعْيُنٍ جَزَاءً بِمَا كَانُوا or know what Allah has prepared away from the eyes of people that will bring you coolness to your eyes as a result of your persistence in your action. So I want you to imagine, when you love somebody, you give them gifts, one of the ways that you express that love. And when you really, really love somebody, you ask all kinds of questions. So what's their favorite color? What do they like? You ask 1,000 questions. You want it to be so special and so personal. And then you also go through extra layers of adding surprise where nobody else gets to see it. It's only for you. So you put it in a nice bag, in a nice box, a nice gift basket, all kinds of ribbons. It puts the thought. So Allah is telling you, imagine the ayah is saying, no one will be able to fully know what Allah has prepared for you, personally for you, as a result of what you used to do. So every time there's a temptation from shaitan, or whatever it may be, and you stand in self-respect and admiration, respect to Allah, and you say no to that, you have just prepared for yourself a present with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that no one else will be able to know about, just between you and Him. What's an example of that present, you may ask? And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says there's a sweetness to Iman that is only felt by the person who controls their gaze. So a person who has, there's so much distraction out there, and it doesn't just mean from lust. This is a general concept. You know, we talk about lowering the gaze, and we specifically talk about it in the context of lust. But it's not just in the context of lust. It's just in the concept of being just focused. Focused and principled and dedicated and not looking where you're not supposed to look. And Allah talks about this with the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You know when he went to Isra and Mi'raj, what does Allah say? مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ وَمَا طَغَى. Okay, imagine you guys happen to end up in Jannah. Okay? And you're being given a tour of Jannah. What would you do? If Allah is giving you a tour of Jannah, you'd be, whoa, mashallah, look at that, look at this, look at, mashallah, that's amazing. You'd be looking up, there's so much curiosity, you want to take everything in. But the Prophet ﷺ, Allah says, مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ وَمَا طَغَى. His eyes did not wander, nor did his eyes transgress. Out of respect for that presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he stayed so focused that he was not looking anywhere except where Allah told him to look. This level of politeness and etiquette, I'll give you another example, more human. You know when you're invited to somebody's home, one of the sunnah is to ask the person, can you please let me know where you would like me to sit? Because there may be like a seat where there's access to the kitchen, or there's access to this, and you, out of respect, you don't want your eyes to wander. You're there for a very specific reason. You appreciate being invited, so you ask that person, please let me know where to sit, because I don't want my eyes to wander. Allah's talking about this kind of attitude, where you're focused, your eyes are focused, as a result your heart is focused. There's a sweetness to Iman that is given for that person who does that. And the opposite is true. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, this is a hadith that I remember before a temptation begins to grow, or that poking of shaitan begins to be felt. What's the hadith? لا يزيد في العمر إلا البر ولا يرد القضاء إلا الدعاء وإن المرء لا يحرم من رزق بالذنب يصيبه. The last thing is ziyada hadith, but ma'na is authentic. What's the last thing? And the human being is prevented from the good that is written for him or her through the sins that she or he commits. Every sin that you commit takes away from the barakah that you're supposed to feel in your relationship. Whether it's your relationship with Allah, your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your spouse. So I want you to imagine from now on, every sin that you commit is just you forfeiting the same amount of pleasure and khair and fulfillment that Allah would have allowed you to experience in the halal. So imagine you cut some corners to attain some money that is not yours. جمع الحرام على الحلال يكفره دخل الحرام على الحلال فبعثره. That person tried to combine halal upon haram to make more, but the haram entered upon the halal and scattered the barakah away. Every look in the haram, you're taking away, subhanAllah, from the look that is meant to be in the halal. Every moment of sin is taking you a moment of pleasure, either in this dunya or in the akhirah. It's so clear, it's so obvious, but forget it sometimes. So Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal used to say, every time I see a relationship issue between me and my wife, you know, subhanAllah, you come back home and you don't know why, but it's just aggression or a lurking negative feeling. Maybe you're not married yet, between you and your friends, between you and this and that. He would say the first question that I would ask is not what's wrong with her, what's wrong with him, what's wrong with them. The first question he would ask is what's wrong with me? What have I committed that took away the barakah in this relationship? Another ayah that I think about, I'm sorry, I'm taking so long, forgive me guys, I hope it's beneficial. One of the other ayah that I think about, subhanAllah, when we have, you know, these thoughts, lurking thoughts from Iblis, is the ayah, قَالَ مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ رَبِّي أَحْسَنَ مَثْوَايَ إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Imagine Yusuf. Ya Allah, I need to contextualize this. Can I please have just 3 minutes? Please? Jazakallah 3 minutes, Mr. Handsome. I know he's not there to compliment you, but I'm here, inshallah. 3 minutes. So, subhanAllah, I want you to imagine Yusuf, guys. Psychology again? Oh, psychology, bismillah. Guys, listen to this, please. Just lend your ear with this. Yusuf. He's thrown into a well by his family. What kind of abuse is that? How much distrust do you build because of that? Okay, so trauma number 1. His family, his dad tells him, be careful, don't overshare. Because some people don't have the best interest. Next, he's thrown into all by his own family. Imagine the trauma. Then, in addition to that, finally he's in the well, he's alone. Imagine he's so sad. He's like, maybe somebody's going to find me, maybe somebody's going to find me. He's young. Maybe somebody's going to find me. Ya Rab, Ya Rab, Ya Rab. He hears noises, sounds, people coming, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, I'm going to be rescued, I'm going to be rescued. They look, they see him, he's handsome. That's the first thing they say. Oh, he's a handsome boy. So he thinks, okay, they think they like me. Maybe they're going to return me back to my parents. Maybe they're going to ask me, where are you from? But the question that they say, how much money do we think can we get from this guy? Now they sell him into slavery. Imagine second layer of trauma. The trauma that you have now. SubhanAllah, you're sold into slavery by the people that you thought are going to rescue you. And then after that, you finally make it to a household, to palace. Oh, people are going to be nice here. They're noble. But then subhanAllah, a few years later, after some stability, the woman who's supposed to be taking care of you abuses you. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Third level of abuse. And then after that, she puts on this whole show where people cut their fingers in front of you because of how handsome you are. It's like, what kind of confidence is that creating? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Trauma upon trauma upon trauma, and then after that, it's like, oh Lord, what's going to happen? You know what? Allah is better. Allah is better for me. I cannot do this. Allah has been good to me. After 3 layers of trauma, what is he saying? Allah is good to me. He recognized all he's seeing are the actions of people, not the actions of Allah. I trust that Allah is going to get me through this. Look at that iman, that faith. And then after that, he's thrown into jail. Now, how is it like behind bars, Sheikh? Not for you, because we do counsel with people in prison, right? So you tell us, it's difficult, it's a different lifestyle. Right? It's a different... It's not intended to bully you, right? So what is it like behind bars? Okay, listen to this carefully, guys. How many of you, if you were to be behind bars, you would actually maintain who you are, maintain your dignity, and be the same person? Most of us would actually say, no, it requires differently. You gotta defend yourself, you gotta smash before you get smashed, that kind of thing. But Yusuf is so trusted by the people in jail that the inmates come to him and say, by the way, last night I had a dream. And this is what I saw in my sleep. When was the last time that a gangster or a thug or somebody in prison came to and says, this is what I saw in my dream last night? How much trust do they have to have that level of vulnerability with you? And you interpret that dream for them, and then they go out and they forget about you. After all of those years of trauma and pain and hardship and difficulties and challenges, he did not give up. And when he was finally, in that last moment, the episode, when his brothers finally came, what did he say? And the brother, where's he at? Who recited the Quran? He began with this, and that's what was in the back of my mind. He said, وَقَدْ أَحْسَنَ لِي رَبِّي إِذْ أَخْرَجَنِي مِنَ السِّجْنِ وَجَاءَ بِكُمْ مِنَ الْبَدْوِ مِنْ بَعْدِ كَانَ يَزِغُ الشَّيْطَانُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِ إِخْوَتِي. He said, and Allah has been good to me when He brought me out of jail, and He brought my brothers out of the Bedouin tribe, after the Bedouin life, after Shaitan has almost separated between me and them. So he's focusing on the positivity. Allah has been good to me when He brought me out of jail. So he doesn't say Allah was bad to me when I went into the well, He attributed all of the bad to human error, but attributed the fact that he came out of jail to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, Shaitan is the one who was trying to jeopardize between us. But alhamdulillah, it all was good because it meant my family is no longer living in the Bedouins, in the Bedouin tribes as nomads. We all get to live together now here. Look at the attitude. All bad is human, all good is Allah. Allah has been good to me. How can I show disrespect to the one who's good to me? And as a result, I'm optimistic, I'm positive, and I'm seeing the best out of the situation as a blessing from Allah. That's the attitude you need to have when you're tempted by sin or the lingering voice of shaitan is around. Allah is good to me, how can I show disrespect to Allah? Allah has been good to me, how can I show disrespect to the one who's good to me? May Allah bless you all and give you the benefit.
Good luck following that.
Yeah, I'll just, like Sheikh said, usually we're in states of heedlessness, and so it's not easy to come up with a verse in those moments. I think the question came from Sheikh Mansour Salimi. He asked, there's a video going around, or Salimi is his name, or Salimi, he was asking someone at the Haram this very question, which ayah do you remember that holds you back from sin? For me, it's not exactly a verse, but usually when people are about to sin, they try to hide it. We try to hide it. Because we worry about what people will say if they see us sinning. And there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah does not look at your outer appearances nor at your wealth, but He looks at your heart and He looks at your deeds. And so one of the scholars, he asked a question here. He said, أَجَعَلْتَ اللَّهَ أَهْوَنَ النَّاظِرِينَ إِلَيْكَ? Have you made Allah like the most trivial of people who are looking at you? And that always kind of gets to me. It's like, man, I care so much about what everybody thinks about me. Do I not care about what Allah sees from me? Like, I hide it from everybody. I don't hide it from Allah, and I can't hide it from Allah. So then what does that mean? What do I think about Allah? And it's a little bit of a painful reality check for me. So that's usually what, if you want to say something coming to mind, that's what it would be.
Barakallahu feekum. Allah reward you guys and reward you for all your effort and beautiful answers. Make sure you all keep the mashayikh in our dua and keep them in your prayers, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. That wraps up the Q&A portion. Make sure we all thank our mashayikh on behalf of the MSA and make dua for them. Let's get a warm round of applause for them, inshallah.